Welcome back to Fascinating History, where today we discuss some of the deadliest battles to take place in medieval Europe. The deadliest battles in medieval England. One medieval battle on English soil was all it took to reshape the fate of an entire nation. In the fields and fortresses of medieval England, kings and conquerors waged devastating battles that spilled blood and sculpted the nation's history. From the snowy massacre at Towton, where tens of thousands fell, to the strategic triumph at Hastings that redefined an empire, these conflicts were fierce and transformative. How did these ancient clashes shape the political landscape and power dynamics of the time? Stay tuned as we delve into how these deadly battles influenced the course of English history. Number 1. Battle of Stamford Bridge. First off, on September 25, 1066, a pivotal clash unfolded at Stamford Bridge, East Riding of Yorkshire. Here, the very course of English history was put to the test in a grueling confrontation between King Harold Godwinson of England and the invading forces led by King Harold Hardrada of Norway, one of the last great Viking kings, and Harold's own estranged brother, Tostig Godwinson. Harold Hardrada's ambition to conquer England was supported by an imposing fleet of 300 longships, carrying between 9,000 and 11,000 warriors to English shores. In stark contrast, King Harold had mustered an army of about 15,000 men, including a formidable force of 2,000 cavalry. What makes this even more remarkable is the Herculean effort required to gather this army and march them approximately 185 miles from London to Yorkshire in just 4 days, a march driven by the urgency to defend the realm. The battle was a surprise assault on the Norse invaders, who were caught off guard by the rapidly advancing English army. The combat was intense and brutal, marked by the close-quarters melee that was typical of the era. It was a bloody confrontation where every sword swing and axe hack was a fight for survival. Norse sagas and English chronicles paint a vivid picture of the ferocity of this battle. A legendary moment from the sagas recalls a gigantic Norse axeman standing alone at the narrow crossing of Stamford Bridge, holding off the English forces, claiming many lives before he was finally overcome. Despite such acts of heroism, the Norwegian forces were heavily defeated, with over 6,000 men killed or missing by the battle's end. While the English emerged victorious, their triumph came at a steep cost. Approximately 5,000 Englishmen were lost, and the survivors were left exhausted by the rapid march and the fierce fighting. This depletion of Harold's forces would prove costly mere weeks later at the Battle of Hastings. Number 2. The Battle of Hastings. In the early morning of the 14th of October 1066, two great armies prepared to fight for the throne of England. In a single brutal day, the future of England was rewritten from Anglo-Saxon to Norman, setting off a profound transformation in the country's nobility, church, architecture, and even the English language itself. On that decisive day, the forces of William of Normandy, known to history as William the Conqueror, clashed with the Anglo-Saxon soldiers led by King Harold Godwinson. While historical accounts often vary, each side likely fielded between 5,000 to 7,000 soldiers, though some narratives suggest significantly larger forces. As dawn broke, neither side could have anticipated the lasting impact this battle would imprint on England. As the battle raged, the daylight began to fade, signaling a critical moment. The Normans, sensing their moment, launched a fierce final assault to capture the ridge. By this point, Harold's brothers and many of his commanders lay slain, tipping the balance of the fight. The climax of the battle arrived with a scene of brutal finality: the death of King Harold. His demise is shrouded in mystery and controversy. Some say an arrow struck his right eye, a vivid image possibly immortalized in the Bayeux Tapestry. Yet the earliest accounts paint a more gruesome picture, detailing how Harold was mercilessly cut down by Norman knights, his breast pierced, his head and thigh severed, and his belly brutally speared, leaving the field soaked with royal blood. By sunset, the battlefield was a stark tableau of loss and victory, with thousands of dead on both sides. The death of King Harold marked more than just the fall of a king. It signaled the end of Anglo-Saxon dominance in England. With Harold's ascent to the throne, a new era began. The Norman influence seeped into every aspect of English life, altering the fabric of society. The Catholic Church was wrested from English hands, and a fusion of Old Norman, Latin, and Norse dialects began to weave its way into the local languages, forever changing the linguistic landscape of the region. Number 3. The Battle of Towton. On March 29, 1461, the largest battle on English soil unfolded relentlessly. On that fateful Palm Sunday, amidst a blinding snowstorm, two massive armies collided on the open fields between the villages of Towton and Saxton in North Yorkshire. Commanding the forces were two fierce rivals, the young Yorkist claimant Edward IV and his Lancastrian adversary, Henry VI. Edward, who had just declared himself king at 18, was determined to cement his claim with a decisive victory. The battle that ensued was nothing short of apocalyptic. About 50,000 to 65,000 men engaged in grueling hand-to-hand combat, their figures almost ghost-like in the swirling snow. The fighting was brutal and prolonged, lasting over 10 hours of relentless melee, where men didn't just fall to enemy blows. Many were crushed underfoot in desperate attempts to flee, or were mercilessly cut down even after surrendering. The carnage was staggering. Chronicles from the period record unimaginable numbers, with heralds who counted the bodies shortly after the battle reported 28,000 dead, while Gregory's chronicle cites 35,000. Despite the monumental scale of this slaughter, Towton has since fallen into relative obscurity, its harrowing details overshadowed by the passage of time. Number 4. The Battle of Barnett. On a foggy Easter Sunday, April 14, 1471, the fields near Barnett, a small town just north of London, became the unlikely stage for one of the most pivotal battles in the Wars of the Roses. This encounter saw the forces of the House of York, led by Edward IV, clash with the Lancastrian troops loyal to Henry VI. What made this battle extraordinary was the presence of three kings: Edward IV, a captive, Henry VI, and Edward's younger brother, the future Richard III, all converging on this small town, setting the stage for a showdown as strategically as it was symbolic. The prelude to this historic clash began a year earlier, when an alliance between Edward IV's former ally, the Earl of Warwick, and his Lancastrian enemies forced the Yorkist leader into exile. After 6 months in Holland and Burgundy, Edward returned to Yorkshire. He claimed to seek only his dukedom, but swiftly marched south, reclaiming London and being reunited with his queen and newborn son. His march didn't stop there. He headed north to confront Warwick, who had aligned with the Lancastrian Queen Margaret of Anjou and was moving south from the Midlands. As dusk fell near Barnett, Edward positioned his forces close to Warwick's, setting the stage for the battle amidst a disorienting fog that caused the armies to misalign. The battle was fierce, characterized by a storm of arrows and the early use of handguns, a new and deadly addition to the medieval arsenal. The fog of that morning added a layer of chaos, obscuring the battlefield and leading to tragic misfires. One side even attacked their men. Within a mere 2 to 3 hours, as the fog lifted, the outcome was clear. Edward IV's forces were victorious. A critical moment occurred when the Earl of Oxford, commanding a wing of the Lancastrian army, initially achieved victory, but confusion arose as his returning troops were mistaken for the enemy under the thick mist, leading to cries of "treason" and further chaos among the Lancastrian ranks. This pivotal confusion led to the disintegration of the Lancastrian forces, ultimately resulting in the deaths of Warwick and his brother, a massive blow to their cause. The aftermath was brutal. As is typical in medieval battles, the fleeing army suffered horrendous casualties. Contemporary sources vary wildly, with estimates ranging from 1,500 to 4,000 dead. Warwick's death marked a significant turning point. His shift in allegiance and subsequent demise ended his manipulations and solidified Edward's claim to the throne. Number 5. The Battle of Bosworth Field. On August 22, 1485, The landscape around Ambion Hill near Market Bosworth in Leicestershire became the backdrop for the Battle of Bosworth Field. This confrontation would forever alter the course of English history. This battle marked the dramatic conclusion to the Wars of the Roses, the bloody civil conflicts between the houses of Lancaster and York, and ended the long reign of the Plantagenet dynasty. At Bosworth, the future of England was placed in the hands of Henry Tudor, leading the Lancastrian faction. His forces, though outnumbered with only 5,000 to 8,000 men, faced off against the larger army of Richard III, which boasted 7,500 to 12,000 soldiers. The battle reached its climax when the Stanley brothers, initially non-committal, chose a decisive moment to throw their support behind Henry, tipping the scales in his favor. The fate of Richard III was sealed during the most intense moments of the battle. Surrounded by Tudor's supporters, Richard fought desperately to retain his crown. Contemporary accounts describe the tragic demise of the king, noting that it was a blow, or possibly multiple blows, to the head that ended his life. These fatal strikes are often credited to Welsh foot soldiers wielding halberds, who managed to penetrate the king's defenses. His death was not just the fall of a king, but the end of an era. With Richard's demise, his forces disintegrated, leaving the field in disarray and paving the way for a new chapter in English sovereignty. The victory at Bosworth Field was significant for its immediate military outcomes and long-term implications. Henry Tudor was crowned King Henry VII, founding the Tudor dynasty, which promised and delivered a new era of relative stability. Henry effectively merged the feuding houses by marrying Elizabeth of York, ending the Wars of the Roses. His reign heralded the end of the Middle Ages in England and initiated profound changes in governance, societal structures, and the arts, setting the stage for the Renaissance period in England. Now, as we wrap up on the blood-stained fields of medieval England, we've seen how the clash of swords and the courage of kings carved paths through history. These battles were not mere skirmishes, but pivotal moments that defined the destiny of a nation. But what would you have done if you stood on those ancient battlefields, sword in hand, facing the unknown? Would you have risen to the challenge or sought peace in the chaos? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, see you in the next video.